Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we've got another Mattel Jurassic World Dino Trackers figure to take a look at. This time we've got a Strike Attack, and yes, I know we just began looking at the Danger Packs yesterday. Well, we'll start taking a look at the Strike Attacks today, and we'll kind of go back and forth and, check them all out. But this time we've got one that was very, very exciting when it was unveiled. We've got the Edaphosaurus, and I personally love Edaphosaurus, but this figure, I think, doesn't look so much like an Edaphosaurus, and that can, of course, be said for a lot of Mattel figures, as they don't usually always look like the species they're meant to represent, but I feel like this one just basically looks like a slightly different Dimetrodon with a different style sail, so it could have been a little bit better, but I'm still pretty excited to actually have an Edaphosaurus in the Jurassic World line. It's very, very cool to have that species entering the line, even if it's not the best version out there of it. But you can, again, see the packaging looks pretty much as you would expect. Interestingly enough, though, we actually have like a ocean backdrop type setting for the Edaphosaurus, which doesn't seem right to me, but you can also see here on the back, again, kind of a sneak peek of the action feature of the Edaphosaurus, as well as the other Dino Tracker figures as far as these Strike Attack releases that are in the line. So let's pop this out of the box and check it out. So here is our Edaphosaurus, and it definitely has a little bit of an Edaphosaurus type of a look, but I still think it looks a little too Dimetrodon-ish for my taste. But I will say that I absolutely love the coloration of this. It is really, really nice looking, and they've done a pretty good job as a whole on the paint job of this one. But one area I really don't like are the eyes, because for some reason it seems as though we don't have pupils, and I don't know why they chose to go that route. They've done that in the past, and I've never been a big fan of it before, and definitely not a fan of it on this one. I'm almost tempted to just give it pupils myself. I hate to kind of alter any figure from its original state, because I always love to keep them original, but the lack of pupils on this one is driving me insane. But regardless, we're going to go ahead and jump straight to a closer look at this right now. So starting up here at the head sculpt of our Edaphosaurus, you can definitely see it sports some pretty nice looking skin texture, some nice kind of like osteoderm-like scales here and there. You can see the lower jaw is quite covered in them, and we also have a pretty nice looking, very reptilian style scaling to the rest of the head and leading down into the neck of our Edaphosaurus. Again, you can see what I was talking about with the eyes, though. Like, they really need pupils. I don't know why they chose to go the route of no pupils on this, but I personally am not a big fan of it, and you can definitely see the eye placement is a little off, so it's kind of sloppy, but it's not terrible. It's not like it's all the way down on the cheek like we used to see on Mattel figures, so that's a plus at least. We have kind of a nice blackish tone for the top of the head. You can see a light gray for the lower jaw leading down into the neck. You can see the black continues to run along the back of the neck. We do, if I can get it open, have an articulated jaw. It's a little bit hard to get open. There we go. So you can see we do have an articulated jaw. We've got the teeth sculpted out in there, as well as the tongue. Very nicely sculpted out tongue, nicely painted with a pinkish tone, given a nice gloss coat as well. We don't, unfortunately, have any paint there on the inside of the mouth on the upper side. The teeth are painted with kind of like an off-white or a yellowish tone, but you can again see that the paint is a little bit sloppy on the inside of the mouth for the teeth, which is very interesting because that's not something I usually see from Mattel. But as we lead back here into the neck, you can again see some more really nice looking scale detail as you move down. You've got a few creases right there behind the lower jaw. You can also see a pretty smooth transition from that black to the gray. As you lead back into the body, you start to see a few kind of osteoderms and scoots and stuff picking up here in the upper part in like the shoulder blade area leading toward the back. You can also again see that the scale detail is exceptionally vibrant, like really, really nice looking. We also have that blackish tone running along the back of the Edaphosaurus, but you can see it runs down here into the front leg as well. We've got a pretty nicely sculpted out leg. Again, the entire leg is black, and there's no nail paint specifically, but since it's black, it kind of works. It looks like it sort of has nail paint, but the back is a gray for the rear leg, so it's obvious then that we don't have nail paint. But again, the actual detailing of the leg looks nice. You've got some creasing there in the joint of the elbow and some scoots running down the toes, and the nails are sculpted nicely, again, just not painted. Leading up into the stomach region, you can again see how nice the scale detail looks, and I like that it kind of like not only decreases in size as you move down, but it kind of slightly changes as far as the shape of the scales. And then as you lead to the underside, you have a very different style of scaling. And this isn't something that you often see from Mattel, because more often than not, they usually give the figures like that same generic type of detail on the underside. So I am pretty excited to actually see that they went a little bit further than they normally do when it comes to sculpting out the detailing of the underside of the Edaphosaurus. That definitely looks nice. You can also see a little hint of like hanging skin there in the throat region as well. But as you continue to move back, you start to see the black taper off here before we transition to the gray primarily for the body. You can see the muscle definition here in the thigh. You can also see again a few of those larger sort of osteoderm-like scales mixing with those smaller, more reptilian type scales. And you can also see again some musculature in the calf. Just like with the Nothosaurus we reviewed yesterday, you can see how the foot's kind of squished, so it's obscured. You can't really see the foot too well, but you can make out the toes and the nails a little bit, which are all a gray, because that entire leg is nothing more than a gray. Front leg's black, rear leg's gray, no nail paint, obviously. As we move back, you can see a few more kind of skin wrinkles and stuff right here. As we lead out into the tail, you kind of have a little area of a slight sail leading out the course of the tail, a few more of those osteoderms leading down, and even a little bit of kind of like a slight sail on the underside of the tail as well. And the tail does have a pretty nice looking curve. And then of course, everyone's favorite area to an Edaphosaurus is usually the sail, and I think they did a fantastic job of sculpting the sail out, as well as giving it a really cool, really flashy paint scheme without having to utilize a whole lot of coloration to it or a whole lot of paint difference, because we basically have that black for the sail, and then you have this really neat yellow that kind of just designs all over the place. And because the yellow is so bright and so light compared to that black, it stands out really nicely, but also again looks very natural overall. And I like the way that they've applied the yellow, where you can kind of see the black sort of creeping through many different areas of the yellow. That is really nice. And when you get close, you can really pick out how nice the texturing to the sail is as well on the Edaphosaurus. The opposing side really isn't going to have much difference, especially on something like this. You can see the legs are slightly different as far as the positioning goes, and the rear leg here on this side, you can see the foot a little better because it's not quite as squished as what we had seen on the initial side, but it's not too far off as far as like the positioning or the appearance. But again, sculpt-wise, detail-wise, paint-wise, everything looks just as nice over here as it did on the initial side, because Mattel usually is very good at consistency, and we can definitely see that here with the Edaphosaurus. And actually, before I forget, there is the fax app code for the Edaphosaurus if you would like to add this one to your collection. And it doesn't look too bad as far as the way that they've kind of hidden that one, but it is still pretty obvious. I would, of course, love it if they just went back to having the scan codes on the undersides of the feet. It was the least obnoxious way that they've done it, but even though it doesn't look perfectly like an Edaphosaurus, I think it looks a lot better than I was expecting it to, so that is a huge plus. And I think it does still have some difference from the Dimetrodon, especially when it comes to, obviously, the appearance to the sail, but specifically in the head sculpt. Again, I was concerned that it was going to look too much like a Dimetrodon, and even though it really does still look very Dimetrodon-ish compared to the, Dominion-style Dimetrodon, it still doesn't look bad, and is still a very cool addition to the Mattel line. As far as articulation goes, again, we saw the articulated jaw, which is a little tricky to kind of get a hold of. There you can see the jaw articulates. We also have the articulation of the neck. It can only go side to side. It doesn't go up and down, and that's because the tail also articulates with it. So you can see as I move the tail, the head moves. So that is the action feature for the Edaphosaurus, kind of like, I guess, it would bite something and then kind of like wiggle and try to tear it apart, but being a Edaphosaurus, I wouldn't really expect it to do too much of that, except for maybe when it's trying to defend itself. And then you've also got leg articulation, which can move pretty nicely. Again, get a decent kind of like a running pose on your Edaphosaurus. A little jerky for the rear leg, but it still works pretty nice. Well, actually, it's only jerky when you get back to the back part of it, because right here, it's actually really smooth, which is a little bit weird, but still pretty fun, pretty much exactly what you would expect as far as articulation for an Edaphosaurus. As far as a size goes, for a length, you're looking at about 7¼ inches or around 18½ centimeters. And then height-wise to the top of the sail, about 4 inches or a little over 10 centimeters, maybe approaching 10.5, but not quite there. For a size comparison, here are the usual review comparison suspects, as we have Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line, next to our Edaphosaurus, showing you that, again, it fits right there in the size range you would expect it to, with the kind of like Attack Pack, Wild Pack, or Savage Strike size range. Those figures are usually all right there in the same similar size range, except the, Savage Strike, or in this case, Strike Attack. Figures usually have an action feature, which is pretty much the only real difference. But you can definitely see it's pretty much exactly as you would expect it to be size-wise. And just in case you still can't figure out the size, here is a Mattel Velociraptor and Dilophosaurus, next to our Edaphosaurus, again helping to stand in here to give you a rough idea of the size. But the size comparison, and just general comparison, I'm most interested to see would absolutely be this, as we have the Edaphosaurus and Dimetrodon next to each other. And you can definitely see again that the head sculpts, they look a little bit different, but not too far off. Although having the two together, I could definitely see a lot more of an Edaphosaurus type look now on the Edaphosaurus compared to the Dimetrodon. Just like the general shape of the head looks quite a bit different, which I don't know if I just didn't notice that really before or what, but it definitely looks better than I expected it to. And I am actually interested to see the fact that the Edaphosaurus is a little bit bigger than the Dimetrodon. But I think that's mostly due to the sail. Like, the overall body looks like it's pretty much the same size. Let's see, lengthwise. Yeah, roughly around the same size lengthwise, but obviously the sail of the Edaphosaurus is a bit taller than the Dimetrodon. Still really cool to see the two of these together, and really cool in general to know that Mattel has released both a Dimetrodon and an Edaphosaurus. So this brand new Mattel Jurassic World Dino Tracker Strike Attack Edaphosaurus is actually a lot better than I was expecting it to be. Like, when I had first seen the figure, I was a little let down because I didn't think it looked very Edaphosaurus-like, and it just generally looked like a slightly altered Dimetrodon. And although it still kind of has a slight, altered Dimetrodon-type look, it at the same time also does have its own unique individuality and definitely has a little bit more of an Edaphosaurus-type look than I thought it did. Still, I think it looks and resembles the Dimetrodon a bit too much, but the overall sculpt and detailing of the Edaphosaurus is really quite nice. It has a very, very highly detailed appearance to it, as Mattel usually does, and on top of that, the detailing is actually extremely, extremely vibrant on this figure, and that's something that has also been quite common when it comes to the Mattel line for a little while now. I feel like they've really hit their stride as far as the overall quality of their figures and how good the actual sculpt and detail looks on the figure, because I really don't think it has ever looked more crisp than it does now when it comes to the majority of the Mattel releases. So that is a huge plus for the figures we are currently receiving. On top of that, I actually really love the paint scheme they've given this one. The paint job is actually really nicely done as well. The application of the paint looks nice and smooth and natural overall, and the paint scheme they've given it looks 100% like it could be the coloration of an Edaphosaurus. Really nice dark tones, and then I like the way that those yellows play off of the darker tones there in the sail. It just really highlights the sail, really helps it to stand out. One area you would expect to stand out would be a sail on an animal like this, and they did a very good job of highlighting the sail, again in a nice naturalistic way. But I also love the black and gray tones of the body overall. I think that as well looks really nice on the entire figure. And on top of that, we have some fun articulation, nothing amazing, but any type of articulation is usually a fun addition to a figure. And we also have an action feature, but the action feature isn't really that great, honestly. It's kind of generic, but I mean, it's, I guess, better than nothing. Regardless, the one thing that I'm not a big fan of on this figure is the eyes. Like, I don't understand the lack of pupils for the eyes. I really think that does take away from the figure quite a bit, and the simple addition of adding some black pupils could have really, really helped this figure a lot. And of course, we could have used nail paint, but that's pretty much with almost every Mattel figure now, especially any mainline Mattel figure. If you look at the Hammond collection, we're usually graced with nail paint there, outside of the Dew Claws, but the main line really gets skimped out on when it comes to nail paint consistently. But as a whole, this figure, again, is definitely quite nice and much nicer than I was expecting it to be. So that is a very, very Big plus for this figure because we now have an Edaphosaurus in the Jurassic World line. So if you are interested in this, I purchased this from Big Bad Toy Store. So I will include a link in the description to where I did just that, as I purchased the entire case so I could get one of each of the different figures from this wave. So make sure if you are interested, you head down to the link that I will include in the description and grab yourself this really cool Edaphosaurus, and along with every other figure from this wave, which again is like the Herrerasaurus, the Geniodectes, and the Zuniceratops, I believe. So again, make sure you check the link in the description, go grab this awesome figure, and make sure you also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.